What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. It is Thursday, February 26th, 2026, and I have some breaking news to share with you guys. Right now it is 14:36 Eastern Time here in the United States, and I wanted to update you guys on the situation with Iran. So it's looking more and more likely that the U.S. is going to launch a full-scale attack on Iran, the likes of which we haven't seen since the Gulf War. I think this is going to be even bigger than the Gulf War, because if you look at the topography of Iran compared to Iraq and the size of Iran's military compared to the Iraqi military under Saddam Hussein, Iran's military is like 10 times bigger or even 20 times bigger than Saddam Hussein's ragtag army with T-72 tanks and some Scud missiles. Iran actually has sophisticated ballistic missiles, thousands of them hidden underneath 10,000-foot mountains. If you look at the topography of Iran, Iran is basically like Colorado or Utah or Arizona. It's a mountainous country, and they have dozens of bunkers underneath those massive mountains. So we're going to have to use a lot more weapons to neutralize the threat, because Iran has so many bases. They have IRGC bases in the Strait of Hormuz. They have all the missile bunkers, the nuclear enrichment sites, radar sites, all kinds of stuff. Plus, we're going to have to use earth-penetrating warheads and possibly special operations ground raids to get into some of these bunkers, okay? So just get prepared, because oil prices could potentially skyrocket once this all kicks off. Iran does have contingency plans in place so that if we attack Iran, they're going to retaliate by launching missiles into Saudi Arabia and all the major oil fields in the Middle East to basically collapse the oil supply and cause oil prices to skyrocket, okay? So get prepared, guys. But wanted to just share some of the latest details here today. We had the meetings in Geneva between the U.S. and Iran, and we're hearing that today's meeting could potentially have been Iran's last chance. But the USS Gerald R. Ford, the largest aircraft carrier in the world, left the U.S. naval base in Souda Bay in Crete after refueling and supplying, and the Gerald Ford is now heading towards Israel, where it is expected to arrive off the coast of Israel tomorrow. Okay, so it looks like they're getting everything in position for a weekend strike, possibly as soon as this weekend or sometimes next week. I don't think it's going to be that much longer. Remember, Trump gave Iran a 10 to 15 day deadline, and that was about a week ago, maybe a little more. So 10 days is going to be roughly this weekend, okay? And here we actually have video footage of the Gerald Ford arriving, or actually, I'm sorry, departing Crete after refueling and resupplying. So here you can see it leaving. And we have breaking news coming in today. A Russian drone launched from a nearby Russian warship approached France's aircraft carrier, the Charles de Gaulle, while it was docked in Sweden's Malmö naval base. The Swedish armed forces detected it and jammed it. The drone then disappeared. It's unclear if it returned or crashed into the sea. And we're hearing that President Trump will decide today to either continue negotiations with Iran or to issue an order to launch strikes on Iran. So he's going to make the decision today after he hears feedback from Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, who met for several hours. They had at least 2 rounds of meetings today in Geneva. So far, we haven't heard any details yet about the results of the meeting, okay? And before I continue with the breaking news, I wanted to mention the sponsor for this update, which is Matt Hat Jerky. Guys, if you're a beef jerky lover like myself, you got to try Matt Hat Jerky. This is the best beef jerky I've ever had. I personally met the owner of this company at SHOT Show, and he's actually local to Pennsylvania. This company has an interesting story behind it. He founded this company when he was 11 years old. Yeah, that's right, 11 years old. He's now 19, and he makes gourmet beef jerky, the best jerky I've ever had. He's got over a dozen different flavors, and it's all sourced with U.S. beef, so no foreign beef, no nitrates, and no MSG. So it's all natural American beef jerky. And if you use my promo code NYPrepper, you can get 15% off your entire order. And you got to go to matthatjerky.com, and I'm going to leave a link in the description down below. That's matthatjerky.com, one word, matthatjerky.com. Use my promo code NYPrepper to get 15% off your entire order, and the link and the promo code are in the description down below. And senior advisors to President Trump would prefer Israel to strike Iran first before the U.S. launches an assault. And despite some officials wanting Israel to act first, the likeliest scenario may be a joint U.S.-Israeli operation. Two people familiar with the discussions told Politico. And the Wall Street Journal, citing recent satellite imagery, says that Iran is continuing work on a tunnel network between Pickaxe Mountain and the Natanz enrichment site. So Natanz is the main nuclear enrichment site in Iran, and they're building a tunnel underneath Natanz to go to Pickaxe Mountain. Okay, Pickaxe Mountain is a massive mountain right outside of Natanz. So they're basically going to be moving all the enrichment material and equipment from Natanz into that mountain to protect that material from U.S. strikes. And we're hearing that 6 U.S. Air Force F-22 Raptors just landed at RAF Lakenheath in the UK, according to local spotters. The current F-22 numbers at Lakenheath Air Base in the UK include 6 that just landed, 6 that landed yesterday, and 13 that were already on base. Plus, there were 12 moved to Israel. Okay, so there's 25 F-22s at RAF Lakenheath in the UK right now. Plus, there's a dozen F-22s in Israel at the Ovda Air Base, I think it's called. And the U.S. has established a full squadron at an Israeli Air Force base in southern Israel, according to GUNNR News. Additional transport and refueling aircraft have arrived over the past 24 hours alongside the F-22s. And Israeli Channel 12 is reporting that an additional squadron of F-22s are expected to arrive in Israel. Okay, so they're transforming this Israeli base into an F-22 base. They have refuelers. They're going to have probably 2 or 3 dozen or maybe more F-22s. That is huge, guys. That's a massive amount of firepower, okay? And Mazar Vision, which is a Chinese satellite company, released satellite imagery yesterday showing 11 U.S. F-22s at Israel's Ovda Air Base, along with what appears to be a Patriot air defense system deployed. So here you can see these pictures. Okay, Chinese satellite company, and you can see all these F-22s here highlighted by the squares, the red rectangles, okay? And more aerial refueling tankers are currently on their way to Israel. Earlier today, 4 KC-46 Pegasus aerial refuelers left Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and flew to Ben Gurion Airport. Call signs were RCH 670, RCH 697, RCH 1809, and RCH 1810. Okay, so more aerial refuelers coming in. Guys, the movement is not stopping, and I've never seen a movement like this in the last 5 years or more. Okay, this is a massive movement that's been ongoing for the last month and a half. Every single day, 20 to 30 C-17s, okay, maybe more on some days, but average 20 to 30 C-17s going across the Atlantic from the U.S. and from Germany to the Middle East, back and forth, back and forth. You know, that amounts to, you know, hundreds and hundreds of logistics flights, okay? Think about that. Okay, this is not a minor preparation, guys. When you're moving that much equipment for such a long period of time, you're preparing for basically a major war, okay? And we're hearing now that over a dozen F-35s are on the move towards Europe now. Apparently, they left Hill Air Force Base in Utah, according to flight tracking data. And Israeli sources tell I-24 News that if gaps in U.S.-Iran talks are not significantly narrowed, Trump will have no choice but to order a strike. Now, Israeli sources are also saying that Hezbollah is said to be expecting a potential strike on Iran within 72 hours, guys. So it could happen this weekend, okay? It could happen this weekend. If not, it's going to be sometime next week, I believe. And senior Iranian officials told Al Jazeera that uranium enrichment is a sovereign right, and Tehran is proposing a temporary freeze for a limited period, but rejects zero enrichment, dismantling nuclear facilities, transferring uranium stockpiles, or any discussion of its missile and defense programs. He added that Iran's proposal in the Geneva talks focuses on sanctions relief and addressing U.S. concerns, including technical and practical pathways and data to show it does not seek nuclear weapons. Okay, so Iran is still sticking to their guns. They don't want to dismantle their nuclear facilities. They don't want to transfer uranium stockpiles. They don't even want to talk about missiles, okay? So what are these negotiations for? Basically, you know, just going around in circles, basically. And the Wall Street Journal is reporting on the demands that the U.S. brought to Iran in Geneva today. So the first one is destroy all 3 major nuclear enrichment sites in Iran, including Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. Deliver all enriched uranium to the United States. No sunset clauses, which means that basically there would be an indefinite ban on uranium enrichment. Zero enrichment, but Iran can keep their nuclear reactor in Tehran. And minimal sanctions relief up front, and more if Iran is compliant. Okay, so those are some pretty big demands that the U.S. has, okay? And I don't think Iran is going to agree to destroying their 3 nuclear enrichment sites and delivering all their enriched uranium to the U.S. So we're going to war, guys. It could be any day now. And Iran says it hopes talks going forward will focus on nuclear issues and sanctions relief. A senior Iranian official says a framework for a deal is possible if the U.S. seriously separates nuclear and non-nuclear issues. Okay, so that's going to be a big problem right there. And Axios is reporting that talks between the U.S. and Iran in Geneva this morning were both indirect and direct. Okay. And some Trump administration officials are privately arguing that an Israeli attack on Iran could prompt Iranian retaliation, which they believe would help build U.S. public support for an American strike. So that's an interesting angle there. That's kind of similar to Operation Northwoods, okay, where under the JFK administration, I believe it was, Secretary of Defense McNamara talked about potentially blowing up a passenger plane in the Caribbean and blaming it on Cuba so that the U.S. would have justification to invade Cuba and the American people would support it. And Rubio, the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, had some very strong words for Iran yesterday. He said, Iran poses a very grave threat to the United States. Wow, guys. Okay, for a Secretary of State and National Security Advisor to say a country poses a very grave threat to the United States, okay, that's basically justification for war, okay? He also said Iran possesses weapons that are designed to attack America. He said Iran is trying to achieve intercontinental ballistic missiles. Rubio also said that Iran possesses a very large number of ballistic missiles, particularly short-range ballistic missiles that threaten the U.S. and our bases in the region and our partners in the region, and all of our bases in the UAE, in Qatar, in Bahrain. They also possess naval assets that threaten shipping and try to threaten the U.S. Navy. So I want everyone to understand that beyond just the nuclear program, they possess these conventional weapons that are solely designed to attack America and attack Americans. Wow. Okay, so very strong words there from Rubio. And U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance commented on Iran. He said, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. He also said, we have detected evidence that Iran is attempting to resume the development of nuclear weapons. Okay, so you see what's going on here. And Vance was considered to be the biggest voice of dissent against this strike on Iran. And now Vance is saying that they have evidence that Iran is trying to resume development of nuclear weapons. Okay, so that means that basically all the major voices of dissent have switched over to being pro-strike on Iran versus against it. Okay. And House Armed Services Committee Chair Mike Rogers says a briefing from Trump administration officials showed clear evidence Iran is working to restart its nuclear program, adding it presents a compelling case that the U.S. may need to intervene militarily. Wow. And the U.S. intelligence community is concerned and monitoring potential asymmetric retaliation by Iran on U.S. facilities and personnel in the Middle East and Europe, according to Politico. And in recent weeks, Tehran has moved to bolster defenses at key nuclear sites, pouring soil and concrete over entrances to protect them from potential future U.S. strikes. And U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff privately told a group of donors that the U.S. was currently only negotiating over the nuclear issue. And Dutch airline KLM is going to suspend all flights to Tel Aviv starting March 1st in response to heightened regional tensions. Okay, so that's this weekend already. And the IDF Homefront Command, which is like Israeli civil defense, is now expanding war preparedness measures across local authorities and schools in Israel. And all U.S. naval vessels assigned to the 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain have now dispersed to open waters in case of a retaliation from Iran. So they moved all the warships out of the headquarters, okay? So this way Iran can't hit them while they're sitting in the dock, okay? That is huge news. Also, the U.S. 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain has been reduced to a skeleton crew of just mission-critical personnel, according to Fox News, citing officials. Wow. And Saudi Arabia is preparing plans for a short-term oil output increase and potential export surge in the event of a U.S. strike on Iran. And White House envoy Steve Witkoff told a private gathering on Tuesday that the Trump administration is demanding that Iran agree any future nuclear deal will remain in effect forever. Okay, so Iran's not going to go for that. And Iran has been apparently loading oil onto tankers at a rapid pace in recent days, a potential sign of preparations in case of an attack by the U.S. And I wanted to just share some footage here. Check this out. These are all of the logistical flights from the U.S. to Ramstein in Germany and then down to the Middle East over the last 24 hours. Look at this, guys. This is just totally insane. And the Kremlin doubled down on their accusations yesterday that Europe is planning to transfer nuclear weapons to Ukraine. So, guys, we got to keep an eye on that because that could be a justification for Russia to use tactical nukes on Ukraine. And a serious threat targeting energy infrastructure across the Nordic nations has prompted heightened security measures and increased coordination among regional authorities. An actor linked to a foreign nation may be behind the threat. Okay, so probably Russian hackers targeting the energy infrastructure in the Nordic countries, which supply a lot of natural gas to countries like Poland. Okay, Poland recently built a pipeline connecting Norway's gas fields in the North Sea to Poland. Okay, so obviously that would harm Europe if the hackers were able to affect that gas supply. And yesterday, Trump had a 30-minute phone call with Zelensky, and apparently he told Zelensky he wants the war with Russia to end as soon as possible, ideally within a month. And we're hearing that the trilateral meeting on Ukraine between Russia, the U.S., and Ukraine has been postponed, and the venue is currently still being coordinated. Interesting. And Zelensky said Ukraine is ready to freeze the war on the current front line, but we are not stupid and will not just withdraw troops from the Donbass. Okay, so I'm telling you guys, there's not going to be any peace in Ukraine. The war is going to continue on. We're hearing reports that Russia is going to conduct a massive mobilization this summer, okay? And then they're going to try to hit the front lines hard and capture more territory from Ukraine. And the Federal Bureau of Investigation has arrested a former U.S. Air Force pilot, Major Gerald Brown, in Jeffersonville, Indiana, for providing training to members of the Chinese Air Force. Wow. Former Major Brown retired in 1996 following a 24-year career flying multiple platforms. He most recently was a contract simulator instructor for multiple contractors on the A-10 Warthog and F-35 platforms before going to China in December 2023 to begin training the Chinese pilots. And Afghanistan has announced large-scale operations against Pakistani military forces along the border. They said in response to repeated border violations and aggressive actions by Pakistani forces, extensive offensive operations have begun against Pakistani military bases and positions along the Durand Line, said an official Taliban spokesperson. But that's the latest breaking news that I have. I will be back later on tonight with a live update. And until then, take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 Ps. Prepare, practice, and persevere. And this update was sponsored by NYPrepper Supply. Guys, NYPrepper Supply is doing a $100 discount on their 3-month emergency food supply. And to get the discount, you got to go to preparewithnyprepper.com. The link is in the description down below. The normal price for their 3-month kit is $800, and they're selling it for $700. That's $700 for 3 months of emergency food, up to 2,000 calories per day for 3 months, and it has a shelf life of 25 years, all packed within rugged, watertight buckets that don't take up a lot of space. You don't have to worry about rotating anything. You don't have to monitor expiration dates. You don't need a massive place to keep all your food. You can fit all this food in a tiny closet in a studio apartment. So use the link preparewithnyprepper.com to get $100 off the NYPrepper Supply 3-month emergency food supply, and the link is in the description below this video.